Station hung in space like a metal flower, its docking arms extending in every direction. Thousands of ships had passed through this hub during the war, carrying supplies, soldiers, and hope to the front lines. Now it waited for the enemy to arrive. Sergeant Brooks stood in the station's loading bay, watching his team check their weapons for the third time. 20 soldiers, all human, all volunteers. They had come to this war looking for purpose, and now they might find death instead. Private Lisa Monroe sat on a supply crate nearby, her young face showing the tension everyone felt. She was only 23 years old, fresh from training on Earth. This would be her first real combat. "Sergeant, do you think we can hold the station?" she asked. Had been a soldier for 12 years. He had learned long ago that honest answers were not always kind answers, but Lisa deserved the truth. "No," he said, "not with standard tactics. There will come in numbers we cannot match. If we fight the way the coalition expects, we will lose." Lisa nodded slowly. "Then why are we here?" Before could answer, the bay doors opened and Captain Daniel Carter walked in. Had met the captain briefly when humans first joined the coalition, and he had heard stories since then. Some said Carter was brilliant. Others said he was crazy. Suspected both descriptions were accurate. "Sergeant Brooks, gather your team," Daniel said. "We have new orders and they are going to sound insane." Brought his soldiers together in a tight circle. Daniel stood before them with a data pad in his hands and a strange light in his eyes. "The fleet will arrive in 8 hours. Admiral Ra is dead. Her ship was destroyed in a preliminary strike 2 hours ago. The coalition fleet is in chaos, and High Commander has assumed control." The soldiers exchanged worried glances, felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders. Ra had been old and cautious, but she was respected. Without her, the remaining commanders would argue among themselves while the enemy approached. "However," Daniel continued, "Commander has agreed to give humans a chance to prove ourselves. He has placed me in command of a small task force. 3 ships and whatever ground forces want to volunteer for a mission with very low survival odds." "What kind of mission?" asked. Daniel smiled that unsettling smile again. "We are going to board a command ship and destroy their communication array. Without it, the hive mind loses coordination. The fleet becomes a collection of confused individual ships instead of one unified force." Lisa spoke up, her voice steady despite her fear. "How do we board an enemy ship in the middle of a battle?" "We use their own escape pods," Daniel said. "Our intelligence teams recovered several intact pods from destroyed vessels. We modify them slightly, fill them with human soldiers, and launch toward the command ship during the confusion of battle. They will not expect an attack from inside their own pods. By the time they realize what is happening, your team will already be aboard." Stared at the captain. The plan was audacious, dangerous, and completely ridiculous. It violated every principle of military strategy he had ever learned. "It might actually work." "What happens to us after we destroy the array?" asked. "How do we get out?" Daniel's pause told everything he needed to know. "We will do everything possible to extract your team, Sergeant, but I will not lie to you. The odds of survival are very small." The loading bay went silent, looked at his soldiers, at Lisa with her young face and steady hands, at the veterans who had survived a dozen battles. They had all volunteered to fight, but this was different. This was asking them to walk into almost certain death. "I will go," Lisa said quietly. "If it gives us a chance to win, I will go." One by one, the others agreed. Felt pride swell in his chest. These were his people, his soldiers, and they were choosing to be heroes. "We will need a distraction," said to Daniel. "Something to keep the focus away from those pods." Daniel nodded. "That is my part of the mission. My task force will hide in a radiation belt near the station. When they arrive, we will attack from an impossible angle, targeting their communication nodes. It will be illogical and unexpected. that will have to respond to us, which creates your window to launch. The plan took shape over the next 6 hours. Lieutenant Maria Santos worked with coalition officers to prepare the captured pods, drilled his team on the layout of ships, using data from previous battles. Daniel coordinated with the 3 captains who had agreed to join his task force. Commander observed everything with his silver eyes. The had initially dismissed the entire plan as human madness, but as he watched the preparations unfold, something in his expression began to change. "You truly believe this will work," he said to Daniel as the final hour approached. "I believe it is our only chance," Daniel replied. "Logic has failed against the for 11 years. It is time to try something else." Chaos said, "You want to introduce chaos into a perfectly ordered battle." They understand order. They predict logic. They cannot predict what they have never experienced. Daniel looked out a viewport at the stars. Humans learned long ago that the universe does not care about our plans. We survive by adapting, by improvising, by doing whatever it takes. That is what we bring to this fight. The alarm sounded throughout the station. The had arrived. Gathered his team in the pod bay. 20 soldiers in modified escape pods, ready to launch into the heart of the enemy fleet. Lisa stood beside him, her helmet in her hands. "Stay close to me when we board," told her. "Watch the angles, keep moving, and remember your training." "I will not let you down, Sergeant," she said. The station shook as the first weapon struck its shields. Through the viewport, could see the enemy fleet spreading across space like a dark cloud. 300 ships, maybe more, all moving with perfect coordination. Then something strange happened. 3 coalition ships broke away from the main defense formation and flew directly toward a radiation belt. They moved in patterns that made no tactical sense, zigzagging and spinning in ways that seemed almost random. The fleet hesitated. For just a moment, the perfect coordination stuttered. Daniel's voice came through the communication system. "All pods, this is Captain Carter. Launch in 30 seconds. Good luck and good hunting." Pulled on his helmet and felt the pod seal around him. Through the small window, he could see Lisa in the next pod, her eyes closed in concentration. The other soldiers waited in their own pods, silent and ready. "Launch," Daniel ordered. The pods shot into space, tumbling toward the massive command ship that hung at the center of the enemy formation. Felt the force press him against his restraints as the pod accelerated. They were committed now. There was no turning back. Ahead, the command ship grew larger in his window. Somewhere behind him, Daniel's task force was fighting against impossible odds to buy them time. And somewhere in the station, Maria was working to crack communication codes. Humans had entered this war as primitive newcomers. In the next few hours, they would either prove their worth or die trying. Gripped his weapon and watched the enemy ship approach. The war was about to change, one way or another. The command ship swallowed pod like a great beast consuming prey. The docking clamps engaged automatically, recognizing the pod as one of their own. For a precious few seconds, no alarm sounded. Kicked open the pod door and rolled into the corridor with his weapon raised. The interior of the ship was dark and humid, with walls that seemed to pulse with organic material. Everything smelled like copper and decay. Lisa emerged from her pod beside him, moving quickly and quietly. The other soldiers followed, spreading out in trained formation. 20 humans now stood inside the heart of the enemy fleet. "Communications array is 3 levels up," whispered. "We move fast and we move quiet. Drop any we encounter but do not stop to fight. Our mission is the array." They advanced through the alien corridors. The ship hummed with strange energy and could feel vibrations running through the floor. Somewhere aboard, thousands of drones moved in perfect coordination, controlled by the collective mind that linked them all together. The first contact came at an intersection. A warrior appeared around the corner, its body covered in natural armor. fired before the creature could react, and it dropped with a hole burned through its center. The soldiers stepped over the body and kept moving. Outside, the battle raged. Through a small viewport, could see Daniel's task force dancing through the fleet, firing and retreating in patterns that made no sense. The three coalition ships moved like wild animals, unpredictable and fast. Interceptors tried to corner them but kept missing, unable to calculate where the humans would go next. On station, Lieutenant Maria Santos sat before a bank of communication equipment, her hands moving across controls with desperate speed. She had spent months studying transmissions, learning their patterns and frequencies. Now she was trying to break their code. "There," she muttered, finding a sequence that repeated in every command signal. "That is how they synchronize." She began constructing a false message, copying the format exactly. If she could make it convincing enough, she might be able to cause confusion in the enemy fleet. It was a long shot, but everything about this battle was a long shot. Commander stood behind her, watching with growing amazement. "You intend to lie to the hive mind." "I intend to make them doubt themselves," Maria said. "Even a few seconds of confusion could save lives." She broadcast the false message. On her screen, she watched two cruisers suddenly change course, responding to orders that had never been sent by their commanders. The ships collided with a flash of light, both destroyed instantly. "It worked," Maria breathed. "It actually worked." Aboard the command ship, steam reached the communication array. The massive structure filled an entire chamber, pulsing with energy that connected this ship to every other vessel in the fleet. Destroying it would blind the coordination for kilometers around. "Set the charges," ordered. 4 on each support column, timer for 3 minutes. The soldiers worked quickly while Lisa guarded the entrances. The had finally detected the intruders and could hear them coming. Clicking sounds echoed through the corridors, growing louder every second. "Charges set," one soldier reported. "We need to move now." They started running toward their extraction point, a secondary docking bay where they hoped to find an escape shuttle. But the corridors were filling with warriors, their bodies moving in synchronized waves. Fired into the approaching mass, dropping 2 warriors. Lisa fought beside him, her aim steady despite the fear that must have been screaming in her mind. The other soldiers formed a retreating line, covering each other as they moved. A warrior leaped from a side passage, its blade arms aimed its throat. He tried to turn, knowing he was too slow, knowing this was how he would die. Lisa threw herself between them. Her shot took the warrior in its head, and it collapsed at its feet. She had saved his life without hesitation. "Thank you," he said. "Keep moving, Sergeant," she replied, already firing at another target. They reached the docking bay, but what they found made his heart sink. The had destroyed every shuttle. There was no way off the ship. "Sergeant, we are trapped," one soldier said. "When those charges blow, we go with them." Looked at his team, 20 soldiers who had volunteered to die. Now that death was certain, he saw no fear in their eyes, only determination. "Maybe not," Lisa said. She pointed to a hull breach on the far side of the bay, a hole torn by some previous battle damage. "If we seal our suits and jump, we might float far enough for coalition ships to retrieve us." It was insane. The chances of survival were almost zero, but almost zero was better than certain death. "Do it," ordered. "Everyone seal your suits and prepare to jump." The soldiers moved toward the breach, counted them as they went, making sure everyone was accounted for. 19 soldiers reached the breach and prepared to jump. Lisa was not with them. Turned and saw her standing at the corridor entrance, her weapon raised. Warriors were flooding toward them, dozens of them, too many to hold back. "Someone has to make sure those charges detonate," Lisa said through the communication channel. "They might find them in time. Someone has to trigger them manually if the timer fails." "Lisa, no, we can all make it." "No, Sergeant, we cannot." Her voice was calm, accepting. "Get the team out. Tell Captain Carter that the mission was successful. Tell him a human held the line." Wanted to argue, wanted to order her to jump with the others, but he saw the truth in her eyes. She had already made her choice. "You are the bravest soldier I have ever known," he said. "Just doing what humans do," she replied. "Now go." Led his team through the breach. They jumped into open space, floating away from the command ship as fast as their suit thrusters could push them. Behind them, Lisa held the corridor alone, firing into the endless wave of warriors. The charges detonated. The communication array exploded in a burst of light and fire, sending shockwaves through the command ship. Secondary explosions followed as power systems overloaded. The great vessel began to break apart. Across the fleet, chaos erupted. Ships that had moved with perfect coordination suddenly drifted aimlessly. Commanders who had shared one mind now found themselves alone, unable to hear the collective voice that had guided them. For the first time in 11 years, they were confused. Daniel Carter watched from his ship, seeing the command vessel die. "The array is destroyed," he reported. "All human pilots break formation, engage independently, show them what chaos really looks like." The human pilots scattered across the battlefield, each one fighting their own private war. They flew in patterns no computer could predict, struck targets at random, retreated when they should have advanced and attacked when they should have fled. They tried to adapt, tried to find the logic in the madness, but there was no logic to find. The coalition fleet saw what was happening. Commander felt something change in his understanding of war. These humans were not fighting with discipline or strategy. They were fighting with pure, unpredictable instinct, and it was working. "All ships," ordered, his voice carrying new conviction. "Follow the human example, break formation and engage at will." For the first time in 11 years, the coalition stopped fighting like a machine and started fighting like humans. And for the first time in 11 years, they began to win. The battle lasted 9 more hours after the communication array fell. 9 hours of desperate fighting, of ships burning in the void, of soldiers dying on both sides. But when it ended, the coalition still held the station. For the first time in 7 years, they had won a major battle. Brooks floated in space for 2 hours before a coalition shuttle found him. 19 soldiers survived the jump from the command ship. Lisa Monroe was not among them. A rescue team searched the wreckage of the command ship, looking for any sign of survivors. They found no bodies, but they found something else. Lisa's helmet, damaged but intact, floating among the debris. She had removed it at some point, perhaps when her oxygen ran out, perhaps when she knew the end was coming. Would never know. He held that helmet now, sitting in the medical bay of station while doctors treated his wounds. The metal was scorched and cracked, but the name printed on the side was still readable. Monroe, L. Private First Class. Age 23. Dead. Captain Daniel Carter entered the medical bay. He looked exhausted, his face gray with fatigue, but his eyes were bright with something like hope. "Sergeant Brooks," he said, "how is your team?" 19 survivors, replied. "We lost Private Monroe. She stayed behind to make sure the charges detonated." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "I heard. Her sacrifice saved thousands of lives. The entire battle turned because of what she did. That does not bring her back." "No," Daniel agreed. "It never does." They sat together in silence, 2 soldiers who understood the weight of losing people under their command. Outside the viewport, coalition ships moved through the debris field, collecting the dead and salvaging what they could. The victory was real, but it had come at a terrible cost. High Commander arrived at the station the next morning. The supreme leader of the coalition military was a species of crystalline beings who communicated through light pulses. He met with Daniel and the other commanders in the station's main conference room. "Captain Carter," said, his crystal body flickering with complex patterns. You were given command of 3 ships and a ground team. You destroyed a command vessel and broke the enemy coordination across an entire fleet. Explain how this was possible. Daniel stood before the assembled officers. Commander sat among them, his expression unreadable. High Commander, the Coalition has been fighting with logic and strategy for 11 years. They understand logic. They predict it and counter it before we even move. Humans think differently. We evolved in chaos, and we learned to use chaos as a tool. When we attacked in unpredictable patterns, they could not adapt quickly enough to stop us. Flickered thoughtfully. You suggest we abandon logic entirely. No, High Commander. I suggest we combine logic with unpredictability. Let the logical species plan the overall strategy, but let humans handle the execution. We can make decisions in the moment that no computer could predict. That is our strength. Spoke for the first time. I watched humans fight at. I saw pilots fly into situations that should have killed them and somehow survive. I saw soldiers hold corridors against impossible numbers. I do not fully understand how they do what they do, but I can no longer deny that it works. The conference continued for hours. By the end, the Coalition had agreed to restructure its military doctrine. Human officers would be integrated into command positions throughout the fleet. Human tactics would be studied and adapted. For the first time, humanity was recognized as an equal partner in the war. But the most important change came from the intelligence reports that followed the battle. They were regrouping, but something was different. Their movements were hesitant. Their attacks were cautious. For the first time in 11 years, the enemy was afraid. Daniel met with in the days after the battle. The sergeant had been promoted to lieutenant, and his team had been given a new name. They called themselves Monroe's Ghosts, in honor of the woman who had died to save them all. I want to take the fight to them, Daniel said. We have spent 11 years defending. It is time to attack. Though asked, eventually, yes, but first we push them back. System by system, battle by battle, we show them that humans do not just survive, we win. Over the following weeks, the war transformed. Human pilots led strikes against supply lines. Human ground teams sabotaged enemy installations. Human commanders made decisions that seemed insane until they worked. They lost more battles in 2 months than they had lost in the previous decade. Lieutenant Maria Santos became famous across the Coalition for her ability to crack communications. She intercepted enemy transmissions and turned them into weapons, spreading false information and creating confusion wherever they gathered. The hive mind had never faced an enemy who could lie to them so effectively. Commander requested a transfer to Daniel's command. The warrior had spent his entire career studying logical warfare. Now he wanted to learn the human way. Daniel accepted him as second in command, and together they developed new tactics that combined precision with human chaos. 6 months after, the Coalition launched its largest offensive of the war. 200 ships, including 50 with human crews, jumped to a system on the edge of territory. Daniel commanded from the bridge of his new flagship, the Unexpected Hope, led a battalion of human ground forces. Maria coordinated communications from a mobile command center. The battle went as planned at first. The Coalition fleet engaged the defenders in standard formation, drawing their attention. Then the human ships broke away and attacked from impossible angles, creating chaos that they could not counter. The enemy fleet fell back, confused and disorganized. But Daniel was not satisfied with victory. He watched the retreat and saw something that troubled him. These were not the unstoppable killing machines that had terrorized the galaxy for 11 years. These were desperate creatures, fighting to survive against an enemy they could not understand. They are afraid, he said quietly too, truly afraid. Is that not good? They asked. Fear makes enemies weak. Fear also makes them dangerous. A frightened enemy has nothing to lose. Daniel stared at the tactical display. "I think there is something we do not understand about something that might change everything." His voice came through the communication system. "Admiral Carter, ground forces have secured the primary objectives. We found something in the command center. You need to see this." Daniel transferred to a shuttle and flew down to the planet's surface. Met him at the command center, his face showing confusion and uncertainty. "We captured their local commander," said, "but something is wrong with it. The do not surrender, they fight to the death. This one asked to negotiate." Daniel entered the chamber where the commander was held. The creature looked like all its kind, and body covered in natural armor, multiple eyes that gleamed in the dim light. But something in its posture was different. It did not stand with the rigid aggression Daniel had seen in other. It stood like something broken. "Human," the said through a translation device, "you have come to destroy us all, but before you do, you should know why we started this war." Daniel stepped closer. "Then tell me." "We are dying," the said. "Our queen is sick with an illness we cannot cure. Without her, the hive mind will collapse. We will become nothing. We conquered other species searching for a cure. We found none." The creature's eyes focused on Daniel. "You are the first enemy we could not predict. You are the first enemy that makes us afraid. And now we must ask something we have never asked before." "What?" "Help us, or watch us destroy everything in our death throes." Daniel stood in that alien room, listening to the enemy beg for mercy, and realized that the war was about to change again. Not through battle, but through something much more difficult. Understanding. The Coalition War Council erupted in argument when Daniel presented this request. Crystal beings flashed angry colors. Officers shouted objections. Even the usually calm representatives bubbled with outrage. "They have killed billions of our citizens," High Commander declared. 11 years of slaughter, and now they ask for help. We should finish them while they are weak." Daniel stood at the center of the room, enduring the storm of anger. He understood their feelings. He had lost friends he had watched ships burn and soldiers die. Part of him wanted revenge as much as anyone. But another part remembered Lisa Monroe, standing alone in that corridor, choosing to die so others could live. She had not died for revenge. She had died for something better. "High Commander, I am not asking the Coalition to forgive Daniel said. "I am asking you to consider the alternative. If their queen dies and the hive mind collapses, billions will become disconnected, desperate creatures with access to a massive war fleet. They will not surrender peacefully. They will lash out in every direction, destroying everything they can before they fall. The death toll will make the past 11 years look minor." Stepped forward. "I have studied this since this war began. Admiral Carter speaks truth. The hive mind gives them purpose and control. Without it, they will become something worse than soldiers. They will become animals." Maria Santos added her voice. "I have been inside their communications for months. They are not evil. They are terrified. They started this war because they had no other hope. They kept fighting because they could not imagine stopping. For the first time, they have reached out to ask for another way." The arguments continued for 3 days. During that time, Daniel worked with Coalition scientists to understand the Queen's illness. Human doctors joined the research, bringing knowledge from their own world's genetic sciences. What they found was remarkable. The Queen suffered from a genetic disorder that human medicine had encountered before, in a different form, in their own species. Human researchers had spent centuries developing treatments for similar conditions. The technology was not a cure, but it could extend the Queen's life by decades. The Coalition Council voted narrowly to attempt negotiation. Not everyone agreed, but enough understood that mercy was sometimes stronger than vengeance. Daniel traveled to in a small shuttle, protected only by a promise from the commander they had captured. It was the most dangerous thing Daniel had ever done. If they were lying, if this was a trap, They would die in the heart of enemy territory. There was a dark place, covered in towering organic structures that reached toward the sky like living fingers. The shuttle landed in a clearing surrounded by thousands of warriors, their bodies tense with the same fear Daniel had seen in the captured commander. The Queen waited in a massive chamber at the center of the largest structure. She was unlike any Daniel had seen before, her body enormous and ancient, her eyes carrying the weight of countless years. She was dying. He could see it in the way she moved, in the trembling of her limbs, in the fading light of her consciousness. "You are the human who changed the war," the Queen said through a translator. Her voice was like wind through dead leaves. "The one we could not predict." "I am Daniel Carter. I came to offer you a choice." The Queen's many eyes studied him. "Speak." "Human scientists believe they can treat your illness, not cure it but slow its progress. You could live for many more years. In exchange, they will end all hostilities against the Coalition. You will release all captured territory. You will join the Coalition as a member species, not as a conqueror but as an ally." The chamber was silent. Daniel could feel the weight of 1 billion minds pressing against him, the hive consciousness considering his words. "Why?" the Queen asked. "Your people have every reason to destroy us. We killed your colony ship. We killed your soldiers. We have been your enemy in every way. Why would you offer mercy?" Daniel thought about Lisa Monroe. He thought about all the soldiers who had died in this war, human and alien alike. He thought about the hatred that filled the Coalition Council, the desire for revenge that burned in so many hearts. "Because humans learned something long ago on our own world," he said. "We fought each other for thousands of years. We killed millions of our own kind. And eventually, we understood that the only way to end hatred was to stop feeding it. You started this war because you were dying. We can help you live. That seems more useful than continuing to die together." The Queen was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice carried something Daniel had never heard from her: gratitude. "You are a strange species, humans. You fight with chaos and show mercy to enemies. You are unpredictable in battle and compassionate in victory. We do not understand you. Perhaps we never will, but we accept your offer." The armistice was signed 3 weeks later. The Galactic Coalition gained a new member species, and they gained a future. Human medical teams traveled to begin treatment for the Queen. Coalition ships stopped fighting and started rebuilding. 1 year after the war ended, a ceremony was held on station. Daniel Carter stood before a crowd of thousands, human and alien alike, gathered to honor those who had fallen. Brooks stood beside him, wearing the dress uniform of a Coalition colonel. At the center of the ceremony space stood a memorial. A simple stone pillar carried the names of every soldier who had died at. At the base of the pillar sat a single object protected by a glass case. A damaged helmet, scorched and cracked, with a name still visible on its side. Monroe, L. placed his hand on the glass. "She would have hated all this attention," he said quietly. "She just wanted to do her job." "She did more than that," Daniel replied. "She showed everyone what humans are capable of, not just fighting, not just surviving, but sacrificing everything for people she would never know." Approached them, his silver eyes soft with something that might have been respect. The had served with humans for 2 years now, and his understanding of them had grown beyond anything he had imagined. "Admiral Carter," he said, "I have a question that has troubled me since the war ended." "Ask it." "How can your species be so fierce in battle, yet so generous in victory? You fought them with a savagery that terrified even us. Then you offered them mercy when anyone else would have demanded destruction. I do not understand how both things can exist in the same beings." Daniel looked at the memorial, at Lisa's helmet, at the names of the fallen carved in stone. He thought about the long history of humanity, all the wars and the peace that followed, all the hatred and the forgiveness. "A long time ago," he said, A human philosopher said that the best way to destroy an enemy is to make them a friend. We have been doing that on our own world for thousands of years. It does not always work. Sometimes enemies remain enemies. But when it does work, when you turn an enemy into an ally, you gain something more valuable than any victory. You gain a future without fear. Considered this for a long moment. Your species confuses me, Admiral, but I am grateful to serve alongside you. The ceremony continued around them, speeches and honors and remembrances, but Daniel's mind was on the future. The coalition was stronger now than it had ever been. They were healing, their queen responding to treatment, their people learning to live without war. And humans had found their place among the stars, not as conquerors or primitives, but as something unique. The enemy had dominated the war for 11 years. Then human soldiers arrived with their chaos and their compassion, their unpredictability and their mercy. They did not just change the course of the war. They changed the meaning of victory itself. Daniel looked up at the stars visible through the station's viewport. Out there somewhere, new challenges waited. New enemies might arise. New dangers would threaten everything they had built. But humans would face them the same way they always had. With courage that made no sense, with tactics that followed no logic, and with a heart big enough to offer mercy even to those who did not deserve it. That was the human way, and the galaxy was only beginning to understand what it meant.